Hi, I'm Debbie from Simply Special Crafts. Today we're going to be working on Amethyst Dreams from Hunkydory. This is the beginning of a series of videos that we're going to do, and today we'll be taking a look at the Swans kit from Amethyst Dreams. I hope you enjoy. The actual name of this three-piece topper set is Wishes on Wings. As I indicated, it's part of the Amethyst Dream collection by Hunkydory Crafts. It's absolutely beautiful. One of the things that makes this kit special is that it is printed on a pearlescent finished card. And then, of course, it has this beautiful Hunkydory foiling and the great die cutting for which Hunkydory is pretty famous. So we have the topper set. Topper just means those are the pieces that you punch out that go on the top of your card. Here's the matching foiled cardstock. And I hope you can pick up that pearlescent finish in the video. It's very pretty. Here's the matching cardstock. So these are the three pieces of Hunkydory card that we'll be using in our video today. We'll also be using two of the inserts from the Amethyst Dream insert pack. The pack comes with 16 different images that are printed to match the kits that are included in Amethyst Dreams. We'll be using, I've already cut this up, but these are from the Amethyst Dreams acetate pack. We'll give you a link to that on our supplies list. I'm using some hot off the press dazzles. These are the silver jewel dazzles. I'm going to be using a 5x7 card. This is a piece of silk finish paper, and it's just spectacular. Once again, I hope the sheen really shows on the video because it's very, very pretty paper, and we'll be using this as an accent paper behind one of our cards. You know, if you've watched any of our videos, that I do love my mirror board, and we'll be using this mirror board from Nouveau. This comes in a pack of, I believe it's 5 sheets of this purple. Don't hesitate to buy the 5-piece pack, because if you're doing more than one of the Amethyst Dreams kits, you're going to want more than one sheet. I've already cut this one down to half size. We'll be using some acetate for a shaker card. Many of the cards that I use are European A6, which means that they are approximately 4x6. This one happens to be 4 1/4 by 5 7/8, but approximately 4x6. This is some Hunkydory mirror board. This comes from one of the matte stacks. These are a great value if you make very many cards, because this A4 size, you get 144 sheets of this in one pack, so you could make an awful lot of cards using this mirror board. This is an 8x8, which I chose to make my 5x7 card, and these come about, I think it's about 50 sheets to a pack in the 8x8. So once again, you can make a lot of cards from a single pack. Just a quick look through some of the other supplies that we'll be using. We'll be using Hunkydory finger lift tape, my favorite adhesive. We'll be using some shaker tape to make our shaker card. We'll be using some Hunkydory 2 millimeter 5x5 foam squares. We'll be using the best glue ever to attach our bows. I have this little needle nose glue bottle out in case I need a little touch of glue for one thing or another. I happen to fill mine with Cosmic Shimmer glue. You can use any mid-weight glue for this. I don't recommend that you use something real viscous like Elmer, something that's kind of watery, because it still might come out a little bit fast. And I don't recommend you use something that's heavier like tacky glue, because tacky's a little too heavy to come down the dispenser well. So just a mid-weight glue works great with these. For a shaker card, we'll use these Nouveau Mirror Ball Stars, another of my favorites. We're going to attach some bows today, and I have a few bows that I've tied with my Embellishment Addict bow maker. If you have recently attended one of our bow making classes, your bow maker may be gold, but it works in the same concept. And we tied these beautiful 3-loop bows. This one just needs to be adjusted a little bit because it's been tied for a while. But a little 3-loop bow, or you can tie simple but very elegant, beautiful 2-loop bows or singles. So we'll be using these on our cards today. I'll be using a couple of different card sizes. We'll have 2 of the European A6. We have one that we're making our own base out of our acetate. I guess it's actually 3 of the A6 and 1 5x7. So in total you'll want 4 European A6 envelopes and 1 5x7. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start with this card today. It's a really simple little A6 card, but I think it's really pretty. Let's go ahead and get started with that. Okay, we're going to start with one of our A6 cards, which I folded along the score line. That's along the channel side. Our natural inclination is to want to fold it where we see the little bump, but you actually fold your card along the channel. I use my favorite crafting material, my Hunkydory finger lift tape. I love this stuff because it sticks well, it's super easy to use, there's absolutely no waste at all, unlike a glue runner that can jam up when you're working with it and cause you to either have to do a lot of work by hand or end up throwing away some of your adhesive. Finger lift tape is wonderful because you can tear it off. It's very forgiving. You can just wrap it back on itself if you get it a little long. And there's absolutely no waste. And one of these rolls is the equivalent of about 4 or 5 typical glue runners, and this runs like $5.95, so it's a really good value as well. Now when I cover my card with my mirror board, my biggest concern is to make sure that my mirror goes clear to the edge of my card. So I like to put my folded side down on the table and then kind of slide my mirror board onto that, and that way you can see I get a nice edge on my card. Then I'm just going to take my long blade scissors, which should be a staple of any card maker's card making supplies. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm just going to use my card base as my outline, and I'm going to trim it right along my card to get a perfect face for my card. This may seem a little awkward at first, but if you get used to doing it this way, it's quick, it's easy, and you can cover a card really fast. So we've got our card covered. Next, we're going to cut down a piece of our cardstock to make our background for this card. Now, I've already said that this card is 4 1/4 wide. I want about an 1/8 inch margin around, so I'm going to cut myself a 4-inch strip off the end of this cardstock. Helps if you turn the machine around the right way. Just going to measure out to about 4 inches. Now, one thing I want you to always remember when you're measuring your cardstock is when you're using a paper cutter, always make sure that you're butting your paper up against the solid end, this piece of your paper cutter. If you matched to that arm that's sticking out, you're going to end up with an uneven cut, because over time that arm, because it folds in and out, kind of self-adjusts in it, and it's not necessarily a straight line, but if you're cutting against the base of your paper cutter, you'll get a nice clean cut. So there's a hint that has been learned after much sorrow and having things not work out the way that they were supposed to. Well, that worked out perfectly. I love my little 1/8 inch border there. So now I'm going to cut this down a little bit further, and I've said that my card is 4 1/4 by 5 7/8. So I'm going to make this Next, cut 5 5/8, and let's see how that fits. Just right. Now here's another little tip that I've been sharing with our classroom people that they said was really helpful. When you go to put this on your mirror board, this tape is really sticky, and once it sticks down, it wants to stay there. And people get nervous about centering this on their mirror. So what I recommend you do is limit the amount of stickiness till you get it right where you want it. We're going to do that by putting our strips of tape on, but then we're going to not peel them all the way. We're just going to peel this down about an inch or so, and we're going to create some little tape flags hanging out the side of our card. What that will allow us to do is to get this right where we want it, but while we do that, we're kind of limiting the stickiness to just this upper portion is exposed. I can slide this around nicely, get it right where I want it to give me just the right borders all the way around my card. And when I get it, see, I don't quite want it at the top there. It's just a little too close. So I'm going to pop that loose because I only have a little bit of my adhesive showing. Now I've got it right where I want it. Now I'll set it down. I'll make sure that my topper stays straight by putting my hand on top, and I'm going to peel those tape flags out. What that allows me to do is keep that exactly where I wanted it so I can get a perfect border. If you're nervous at all about centering a card, that's a great way to go at it. Next, we're just going to take our little Enjoy Your Special Day topper off our sheet. You'll notice I'm popping this from the back towards the front. That's because, if anything, the Hunkydory die cutting tends to be really good, and things will usually pop right out. But if something's going to snag a little bit, I want it to snag on the back of my tag, not on my pretty designer and my foiling. And usually you don't have any nibs. I see I have just one little one there, so I'll just take my fingernail and kind of smooth that nib down a little bit so I don't have that little point showing. And I'm going to put this up on some foam squares just for a little bit of added dimension. You don't need an awful lot of foam squares when you're putting a simple topper like this down. I'm going to say for this one, I'm going to use about 7 foam squares. One down the middle, one at the middle, top, bottom, left and right. Just about like that's perfect. You don't need them really ever to be more than about an inch apart. Now I could take a pokey tool and take these off here really quickly, but generally I find I actually do okay just taking them off with my thumbnail. And I'm going to position my topper towards the top, not on the top, but towards the top of my card so that I can have room left to put my pretty little bow. I've already pre-tied my bow out of satin, white or ivory satin ribbon. Isn't that pretty? For those of you who want dimensions, I'm tying that on about a 4, and I'm making a double bow out of that. If that doesn't make sense to you, tune in and watch our bow tying videos. Now, lots of us have grown up using glue dots to apply these, and there's nothing wrong with glue dots for attaching embellishments. But did you ever notice that if an embellishment's going to fall off, it will usually be the bow? The glue dot just doesn't stick quite as well to the fabric as it does to the paper or plastic components that you might be using for embellishing. We found a perfect tool for that, and it's called the Best Glue Ever. Using the Best Glue Ever, This is a great product for what I'm going to show it to you for. It's not something that I use for every application. The best glue ever is perfect for attaching bows because the best glue ever actually dries into a glue dot. What makes the best glue ever perfect for this job is that it dries as a glue dot, and yet it goes on as a liquid. Now, oops, the good part of that is that while it's in a liquid form, it really gets into the fibers of the cloth in your ribbon. And so once this goes on, we've already said that glue dots stick really well to paper, but they didn't necessarily stick well to the fabric. Well, the glue is going to bond it to the fabric, and the glue dot's going to bond it to the card. And once we put this on, it's just not going anywhere. Now, one trick with using this is that when you put on your best glue ever, you don't want too much. I hope you can see on camera how much I'm using there. Just little fine lines is enough to get the job done. And it's going to sound counterintuitive, but the secret to using the best glue ever is let it dry before you apply it to your card. You'll know it's dry because it will turn into a clear glue dot. Set it aside, let it dry completely, and then attach it to your card, and that bow's not going anywhere. You'll notice also that I actually put a little bit of glue on each one of the loops of my bow and a little bit on my tail so I can position those things where I want them to go, and my bow will stay looking beautiful on my card too. So I'm just going to set this aside, and we've actually completed the outside of that card. Once we put our bow on it, this one's going to be done. Let's take just a moment and we'll line the inside of that card so we can remind you how we do that. Now, you can line your card, if you choose to do so, with a full liner on both sides. Because I make so many more cards than what Hunkydory generally assumes I'm going to make out of a pack, I find that I actually prefer to just line the writing side of my card because I can get a lot more cards done with a single pack of liners. And when I go to line my card, it's a really pretty simple proposition. In this one, because I'm not trying to work around an image, I have an all-over background, I'm just going to put down my strips of easy tear tape. I'm going to expose my tape. Now here's a trick. Now notice when I tried to pull that up, it didn't want to come right up. If it doesn't come right up, tear it from the middle and pull it back both directions. You don't have to, fight with that. Just pull it from the center. I'm only going to take one of my strips off, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my insert right inside my card, right to where I want it to go. So it's harder to do this because I work at an odd angle when I'm talking on video. But I'm going to stand it up in there right where I want it to go. I'm going to close my card. And this is positioned just right. Now, I'll go ahead and I'll remove my other piece of tape inside here. Now my insert is tacked down completely and it's positioned right where I want it. And I'll just cut around my card and I have a perfect insert. And I can see when I go to cut this that I have just a tiny bit of hangover at the top. I'll get rid of that while I'm at it. There we go. I like to use long blade scissors when I'm working on my craft projects because the less swipes you have to take at something, the less times you open your scissors, the more likely it is that you will be able to stay right on the edge of your card. So a nice long blade will limit the number of times you have to open your scissors. But there we go. First card finished. We'll add our bow in just a few minutes when that has a chance to dry, and let's roll right into card number 2. This time we're going to make this beautiful card. Look at the way the swan's necks come together to form that heart. That's beautiful, isn't it? These are really great for romantic cards. Did you know that swans mate for life? That's one of the reasons they're often used as a symbol for love. That and the fact that when they come together, they really do create this kind of heart shape. So, beautiful. Let's go ahead and get started on that. We're going to start by covering our card with some silver mirror board. We've talked about the how-tos, so I'm just going to work really quickly here. I usually put down three lines of adhesive. Again, if your adhesive gives you a problem at all, tear it from the inside. That's quick and easy to expose your tape. I'm sliding my card up against my mirror board so that it will be nice and even along the back. Now in this case, I got it off a little bit, but that's okay because I at least have it fully covered, so I'm just going to cut off that extra. And here's something you run into once in a while. See, my card itself is just slightly uneven. You can go ahead and trim those up now, or you could do that with your paper cutter. I'm just going to trim off that extra little bit of a flap while I'm cutting here. And I've got my card covered with my mirror board. I'll save this nice piece to cut some pretty embellishments in and some nice words for use on other cards. Don't worry if your mirror board gets a few fingerprints on it as you're working with it. That happens. And this time we're going to use that silk background paper. This comes in A4 size sheets, and it comes in a variety of pack that has silver and gold and purples and blues and greens. It's really, really elegant, beautiful paper. Not absolutely essential to buy that, but I've really enjoyed using it with this project and other projects. Because my card is 5 by 7, I'm going to cut my mat for my topper to be 4 3/4 by 6 3/4, and that should fit nicely. And it fits pretty well. I'm going to use I'm going to actually trim that just a tad more in width because my card was not folded. You know, the manufacturer made it just a little bit off. I'm going to take just a tad more off of my mat here and see if I like my border a little better. I'm still off just a tad. I may have to get my better paper cutter out here. Those of you who watch our videos know that my absolute favorite, here's my problem, uneven edge. My absolute favorite paper cutter is there it is, that's perfect now, is my Caterpillar, because I thought I might want my scoring blade. I pulled this one over, but that's actually my preferred paper cutter, is my Caterpillar Pro. It is absolutely the most accurate paper cutter you're going to find anywhere. It's in this price range, at least. You can spend hundreds for paper cutters, and I'm not going to say there aren't some really expensive ones that are really good, but in the price range you won't beat the Caterpillar and the Caterpillar Crop, which are our favorites here. I usually put down, people ask me how much adhesive to use. I usually put down 3 rows of adhesive with just about anything that I'm doing in this size, working end to end. Now again, my tape's just a little long. I'm just going to fold it back on itself. And I forgot to make my tape flags, so I'm going to do that. I will have maybe a little more trouble since I exposed that adhesive. But we'll see what we get. And I'm liking that. I think that looks pretty good. So hold my flags. My card is now covered. Next up, I'm going to attach my topper. And we're going to use this great big one with the swans. Isn't that pretty? Love that. Just realized I did something else I didn't mean to do. I'm going to lift this just a little here because I wanted to run my bow around the bottom of my card and I didn't do that. So I'm going to lift it a little and I'm going to grab my bow that I've already pre-tied. Now I'm not going to use the best glue ever on this bow, and the reason for that is because I'm actually attaching this bow to the back side of my topper before it goes on my mirror board. I'm kind of glad sometimes you guys see me make these mistakes because I know you do too, and you need to know we all do it. Sometimes we just, forget ourselves and don't do everything in the order we intended to do it. But you also saw it's not a disaster. I just lifted this particular paper. The silk paper is really durable, so I knew I wasn't going to have any trouble lifting that out of my adhesive to wrap my card around, or my ribbon around it. It's not a real heavy paper, but it still has enough substance to allow me to put my bow on and get away with that, with putting it around the back. So what I've done here, you saw, just to hold my bow in place, I'm putting some finger lift tape down the sides of my bow. That's also what's going to allow me to anchor it in the back. I'm going to expose my adhesive. And I'm still going to probably put a little piece of tape here to hold my petals of my bow out. Once again, if your tape gives you any trouble about lifting it, just tear it from the center and pull it back both directions. Now, I want my little petals of my bow to show on both sides, and this one keeps trying to kind of tuck back in. So I'm going to put just a little piece of tape right there to hold that where I want it. It's going to be on the back, nobody's going to see it, and that's going to help me keep my bow looking full and pretty from the front. There we go. And this one's behaving pretty well over here, but let's go ahead and put a piece on that too, just to make sure it continues to behave. A little piece of finger lift tape right there. Peel my paper. Got my fingers on this tape now. Maybe I can get that lifted up. There we go. Okay, time to attach my bow. I want my bow to be pretty much right in the center. And I want it to be up about a ½ an inch from the bottom of my card. I'm going to do this. I'm going to push that down a little bit, so I'm going to lift this up again. Adjust my petals of my bow where I want them to be one more time. That looks good. Wrap my ends around. And now put that back down. This bow isn't going to go anywhere. It's going to stay right where I put it, because it's attached to the back. Adjust my little petals where I want them again. Ribbon's trying to kind of roll a little bit on me, and straightening that out as I go. This ribbon over here wants to be at kind of a funny angle. I'm going to pull that down and make that behave too. That little piece of tape that I had on the bottom there is kind of cattywampus, so I'm putting another little piece of tape to hold that bow down where I want it. There we go. That looks pretty. There we go. I'm going to take my topper and I'm going to slide it slightly underneath when I put it on so that it will look about like this. So I'm going to put a few little foam squares in behind that. I always like to add dimension when I can. Again, I don't have to go foam square crazy, just a few. We'll hold that in place nicely. If it's a big topper like this one, I like to make sure I have one in the middle. Just kind of hold that up. And we're almost done here, guys. We're going to attach our topper. Sometimes people like to use larger foam squares, and we certainly have lots of sizes and styles of foam squares available in the store. I just have the habit of using the little ones, but we have these available in all different sizes. And of course, if you're using the larger foam squares, you have less peeling to do to put those on. So we have them in the 1/2 inch, the 3/4 inch sizes, and even some of the larger ones. So if that's what you prefer to use, we do have those available for you. I'm going to put my True Love up on a couple of foam squares, and one little trick here is that I'm going to use foam squares just under the top of this, and then I'm just going to let it rest on my other topper since it already has some foam squares under it. I don't want one side to be higher than the other, so I'm just going to kind of let it rest there. And my final finishing touch is going to be just to put a few little jewel dazzles on that. So I've got my jewel dazzles here, and I'm going to use these in between size. It's surprising how often the perfect little extra embellishment is just to put a row of 3 jewel dazzles. I don't know what it is about that, but it just creates sometimes just a perfect little complement to finish your card. You could certainly do this with tweezers if you wanted to do that. Okay, the outside of our card is finished. We're going to line it really quickly. Now, I showed you before that I took out of this corner. I'm going to take this 5x7 from here, and that will still leave me one European A6 to use over here on a separate card. So by turning it and using it in the different directions, I'm going to get 3 cards out of one sheet of liner paper. And I'm going to do that just the way we did the one before. I'm going to put 2 strips of adhesive down inside my card, 1 on that edge. I could put 3, but because it's really lightweight paper, it doesn't really require 3. I'm going to put 1 there, 1 there. I'm going to peel this one back. I'm going to put my liner paper against the fold of my card, and I'm simply going to close it. I'm going to trim around it with my long blade scissors. And my card is now finished inside and out. Okay, let's move on. For the 3rd card in our Wishes on Wings series that we're doing here, we're going to make this beautiful shaker card with the swan and those beautiful little pieces inside. You won't believe how easy it is to make a shaker card if you haven't made one our way yet. Let's go ahead and give that a go here. This time I'm actually going to cover my card only in my background paper. So once again, I'll fold my card down on the score line. I'm taking this piece of background paper. I'm going to leave myself plenty of room to use this image, which I will have. Once again, an A6 piece of cardstock, 1 piece of A6 will make 4 faces, card faces, if you were to just cut it in 4ths. What?
It's not A6.
It is A6. Oh, I'm sorry. My daughter corrected me. 1 A4 piece of cardstock, the full sheet was A4, will make 4 A6 toppers. That's what I was trying to say. So I was thinking right and saying wrong. I'm constantly telling people, don't listen to what I say, listen to what I mean. I meant you can make 4 A6s. Okay, so I've got my 3 pieces on. I am peeling back my tear tape. I am going to bring this piece of cardstock, watching out for my swans above, right up against the back of my card, like so. I'm going to cut this off, and I will still end up with a piece that's perfectly sized to do my card, my last swan's card out of that. So set that aside, and I've got my covered cardstock. Next up, I'm going to pop out this topper. One of the things that makes Hunkydory card kits perfect for making shaker cards is that almost every set has at least 1 frame that is cut in multiple pieces. You can see that this frame, you actually have the outer frame, you have this little inner frame, and then we have the image in the center. We're going to use this outer frame to put our acetate in to make our, pushing it forward. Sometimes it's hard to get your fingers in there just right to push it out, but pulling it forward so I'm not messing up any of my pretty foiling. This is going to become the background to my shaker. So I'll be positioning this in the center, and this is going to become my window for my shaker. I'm going to take a piece of acetate and I'm going to attach it on here. I'm going to use my finger lift tape word of caution here. I want you to seal this really well. And what I mean by sealing it is that I want to make sure that you have actual adhesive touching every angle. Okay, so you can see that I've taken my easy tear tape, I hope you can see it on camera, and I've actually kind of overlapped it just a bit, and that's going to be kind of a pain to peel it off, but my point was that you want to make sure that every little angle has tape. And the reason for that is that you can fill a shaker card with all different kinds of things. Today we're going to use those little confettis, and those confettis are really flat. And they could escape our card if we had any area that wasn't really attached down nicely to that acetate. So I want to make sure I have a nice solid line of acetate. There's Amy making her presence known. For those of you who watch our videos, you know that I have a little senior citizen dog that likes to come out to the shop when I'm working, and she often lets you know she's here. She's a little schnauzer poodle mix who's very, very spoiled, and very senior. So she gets away with a lot. Of course, she got away with a lot when she was a puppy too, so that was my excuse then. Now it's that she's old. Okay, so I'm going to press my acetate down into that, and now I'm going to go off camera for just a minute while I carefully cut around my frame so that I have a nice even border around my frame, cutting all of this extra acetate off, and I'll be back in just a second. Okay, we've got our little window, we've got our acetate in there, we got this nice, clean, beautiful window. Now I'm going to take this shaker tape. This happens to be 3mm shaker tape that I'm using here. We have it in the store in 2 and 3 millimeters. You can use the 2mm for most cards, especially if you're using little, fine, small beads, glitter, or if you're using like this confetti that we're using tonight that's really flat. But if you're using like cup sequins that are a little bit bulkier, or you're using larger beads, in order to allow them to move freely within your card, you would want to have the 3mm, or you could do what I'm doing right here, and you could stack 2 pieces of that foam tape, just one right on top of the other, and that works just fine too. But word of caution when you do this, and we learned this in one of my classes, I'm very accustomed to tearing my tape because I use that easy tear tape at the end of each one of my lines. And so when I was demoing this to my class, I was tearing the tape, and everybody else did that too. Then we finished our shaker cards, and we found that all of them were leaking. And we figured out that the reason that our cards were leaking was that when we were tearing our tape, we were making the tape ununiform. It wasn't thick enough anymore, and it had gaps in it when we put it on the card, and those gaps were letting all of our contents out. So don't tear your shaker tape. Put your shaker tape down and clip it. Once again, it's really important that every area be covered solidly with the adhesive. Now, before I take my backing off of this, here's another little clue. This is an Embossing Magic pillow. You can also use the little pillow from Scrap Perfect. You could use some powder if you wanted to do that. We're going to mess up that pretty window, and we're going to kind of deactivate the adhesive that's on the sides of this shaker tape. What I want to do is make it not sticky on this inside edge, because I don't want my confetti, my sequins, to be sticking to the adhesive on the inside of my border. I want though I want it to move freely in there. So this will deactivate, or largely deactivate, the sticky on the side of that. Now we took that pretty window and we made it all messy. See that? It's got all that powder on there. I don't want you to worry about that. That powder is going to disappear within just a little bit of having the contents in here. And the window will be clean again. But by putting that powder on there and messing it up a little bit, what we're doing is we're reducing the amount of static electricity in there that doesn't let things move freely, especially lightweight things like our little sequins will be. Okay, what I'm doing right here now is deciding where I want to place this centerpiece so that my frame will look just right on my card. And I think I want it to go right about there. So kind of eyeballing it, it's about a half an inch from either side and an inch from the top and bottom. Because I actually have two pieces of frame here, I'm going to try and hit it with my tape kind of between those seams to hold my two pieces of frame together. Once again, I don't want my little sequins and my components inside my shaker to be dropping down between those two seams. It's not that they would get out of my card, but they disappear from where they were doing their job. So I'm kind of taping over both of those pieces at the same time to try and get those two pieces of frame to kind of stick together there. All right. Anywhere I have little hangovers, I'm just wrapping it back on itself. I'm going to look at this again and try and place that right where I had it, about a half inch in from either side, an inch from the top and bottom. Now I'm going to open my card up because I want my card to be very flat when I put my jewels on. Another question I get a lot is how many do I use? Now you can use as many as you want, but that many right there, which is probably of these, I'm going to say, what, honey, maybe a half a teaspoon? About a half a teaspoon of those little confettis will be perfect for creating the amount of movement that you want without overcrowding and without wasting them. One bottle of these confettis will go a very, very, very long ways. I've used that bottle in classes, so we've had multiple people using it. I've used that bottle in my Christmas cards. I used that bottle in demonstrations on camera before, and I still have half a vial left, which is fine because they're my favorites. So I want them to last pretty much forever. They won't last forever, but they will last a long time. Now I'm peeling my tape and getting ready to place this right over the top of our shaker components. I don't know if you've made these before. I know there's about as many ways to make a shaker card as there are people making them. I hope you find this to be a fun and easy way. I think it's about the easiest way that I've seen, especially, as I said, since Hunkydory makes these frames that are already split, and Hunkydory is already one of our favorites. It makes perfect sense for me to use Hunkydory to make these pretty shaker cards. Now, what you see me doing here is I'm just pressing that foam tape down really good, creating a nice seal around there before I shake my stuff around in there. And look, we got a nice tight seal. The first time you put it on, it's still going to try and stick to the adhesive. Just tap it down a little. And after you've shaken it down a couple times, you'll still have some pieces that stick up there. That's okay, they're pretty. But you'll see it, you get a lot of nice movement. And you can see that even though we didn't put a tremendous number of those confetti in there, look at the nice movement we get from there. We only have one thing left to do to the outside of that, and all I'm going to do is take one of these little buttons, one of these little printed buttons, and I'm going to put a little foam tape on the back of it. so it has some added dimension. And I'm going to stick it at the top there right alongside my topper. I like to create kind of asymmetry rather than symmetry. You want, you know, very few things in nature are absolutely perfectly even on both sides. So by adding this little topper up here, I'm creating just a little difference in that corner. And this card's done on the outside. How quick was that for doing a shaker? The only thing we have left to do is to line it. I'm not going to make you watch me line it again, but you can see that that piece of liner that we had left over is the perfect size for this card. I'll tape that in place and we'll move on to card number 4. Okay, next up we're going to make this one. We're going to use that leftover piece of cardstock we talked about. And I've already taken the liberty of covering my A6 card with some purple mirror board. Next I'm going to cut down this topper to fit. As we said before, this card is 4 1/4 inches wide, so I'm going to cut this topper to 4 inches so that I can have an 1/8 inch border around it. And I know that it's 5 7/8 inch long, so I'm going to cut this to 5 5/8 inches long. We'll check that. It's not unusual that I go back and trim a little more, but I'd like to be prepared to trim more if necessary rather than having less. I see that I have just a tiny bit of white showing at the end of that. I'm going to trim that off with my paper cutter. Now I don't have a little bit of white showing, but that's not going to necessitate trimming. Just a tiny little extra bit off of this so that it will still fit that space nicely. There we go. Okay, that's going to be a really nice, narrow but pretty border around there. You say, well, why do you cover it with mirror board and then put something almost the same size over the top? Because the effect you get from that edging is unlike anything else that you can do. It's just beautiful. Some people have said, well, mirror board's not cheap. I don't want to waste all that underneath. I have customers who will cut this out and use just the frame. I don't do that because I make an awful lot of cards for demonstration, and candidly, I just don't want to take that much time. But if you wanted to, you could save those little center sections of mirror board and cut your greetings and things out of those. It's a perfectly practical idea. So I've got my topper. Now before I attach it, I'm going to want to put my ribbon on, and while we were off camera, I went ahead and attached my tape to my ribbon, then promptly covered it up with things, so it got a little bit squishy, but I'm going to fix it here. Okay, I tied a double bow at number 5 on the pink bow maker. If you were using the gold one, that would be the medium one. You know, we have the 4 little tines in the center, and then we go out and start counting again at 1 with the larger ones. So this is going to be a number 1. And I tied 2 loops. I put my double stick tape right on the back of my ribbon so they could fasten this in behind. Again, no need for the best glue ever, since I'm attaching it behind. It's not going to go anywhere. Fluff out my bow petals just a little to make that pretty. There's my beautiful topper. I'm going to put my tape flags on the back, especially since I have such a very narrow margin on this one. Those tape flags are really going to be good at helping me to position this just in the right spot. So I'm going to pull my tape flag down about an inch or so. And I pull this tape flag down just about an inch or so. didn't want to let go. Maybe a little more than an inch since it wasn't letting go. There we go. Just hang those edges out the side so I can use this to position this right where I want it. I know that I have a little tiny narrow margin this time, so I'm going to get that showing all the way around. I like that. So I'll attach it up here, make sure that when I attach it, this didn't slide. That looks good. I'm going to place my hand right on top and pull my tape flags. And now I have a really nicely centered card that is upside down. We have all done that, friends and neighbors. So now, what do you do when you do that? I'm not going to cut this out because we've all done this. We've all done it. I'm going to cut this off of my cardstock. Just got to cut my card back off. Would you get me another card, honey? And as long as I've still got it looking nice, and I think it's going to, yeah, this is going to look fine. I'm going to cut that face off, and I'm going to attach it to another card. No matter how many years you make cards, and how many thousands of cards you make, you know what? It still happens. It happens to the best of us, guys. Just as well laugh about it. Now, I did cut this card down just a tad earlier, so I'm going to have to cut this one down just a little bit to fit this topper. That's funny. I would say I can't believe I did it, but I can. I can believe I did it. I've done it before. I will do it again. Oh, okay. So I'm going to tape my card in place, and we still have an absolutely beautiful card. I'm going to do this later because you don't need to watch me do that. I'm going to get my little jewel dazzle stickers. There they are. And I'm going to add my 3 little jewels up here at the top. And because this is a pretty simple card, I'm going to add a couple of other little jewels, dazzles, to other places on this card face. It definitely is a card face right now. Whoops. That's one of the ones I'm going to go in the house wearing. Do you ever notice that when you work with these little dazzles that sometimes they flip? I go in the house sometimes after an evening of card making, and I, like that one did too, I have them all over me. Sometimes I have them in my hair and my clothes. Between glitter and dazzles, I can go in a real mess. I'm a messy but happy crafter. Okay, got my little 3 jewels in a row. And then see all these little sparklies? I'm not going to put one on all of them, but I'm going to add a few little dazzles right in the middle, so using the tiny ones. I'm going to add a few little dazzles to, this is a job for my tweezers. See those little pointed tweezers? Those are so good. We have these available in the store. They're like $3, and they're just really fabulous little tweezers. I'll give you a link on the video to these because these are wonderful. And it's just such a great tool. They're so fine pointed. But I like to put just a few little extra sparkles here and there. This is how I like to do these. If I'm doing a bunch of them, I like to roll them off on my finger and then pick them up from my finger to put them on my card, or flip them onto my card, whichever comes first. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to stop that one there. Well, the technique that I showed you for putting your your insert in, closing it, and getting your card to line up automatically works great when the picture is in the right place. But what do you do when the picture is in an odd position like this? Well, here's what I do. I'm not into measuring any more than I have to, guys. So I'm going to put the corner where I want that image right inside my card folder. I'm going to hold it in place. Make sure I get it clear down in there. I'm going to hold that in place. I'm going to trim around it just like I would if I had already put the adhesive down. You have to kind of hang on to it to do this, but it works pretty well, really. Because I'm into as quick and easy as possible. Now I'm going to turn this around, and I'm going to go ahead and put my adhesive down, close it as normal, and I've got my insert cut for the proper position. That one's done. Let's go to the last card. Okay, now we're going to look at our fifth and most unusual card in this collection. This is a card that's made without a base card. It's really pretty. We see the swan swimming in the lake, and there's a lot of dimension. We've got these waves ahead of her, then we've got the swan, we've got the butterfly up in the air, we've got this label on the front. It's just really charming card, and I'm going to show you how to make that. We're going to begin with some acetate, and as I indicated, I already cut this down for my classes, so I'm going to go ahead and give you the measures now. I have taken the full sheet of acetate, and I've cut it. I've taken this one that's got the kind of
pattern.
Yeah, the pattern, whatever you call that pattern, kind of Victorian pattern, leafy pattern. On the front, I used the black here. You can also use the purple foil, whichever one strikes your fancy. And then the first thing that I did was I cut the extra little bit off of it, and I made it 11.5 inches. So I cut this down. I cut it to 4 inches wide, and I cut it to 11.5 inches long. Now I admit, I only cut it to 11.5 inches long to make my math easier. That's why I did it. Then I scored it, and I scored it at 1 inch, I scored it at 2 inches, and then I scored it at 6 3/4 inches. So you've got 3 score lines. We're going to begin with this piece by fan folding it. And when I mean fan folding it, I mean I'm going to fold the first piece down. I'm going to create a mountain. Then I'm going to create a channel by folding the next one up. Okay? And then I'm going to create another mountain by folding this one down. And I should have a piece that looks just like this. Okay? I'm going to kind of, if you have a bone folder, this is a good time to use one. I'm going to kind of press those score lines in now. So I got a nice crisp score. And now I'm going to take a second piece of acetate. And some of your acetate designs in your kit are clear on one side. I used one of the clear pieces for this.
No.
And I've cut this to 4 inches wide by the full length. This time I used the 11 3/4. And starting at the bottom, I scored it up at 1 inch, at 2 inches, at 6 inches, at 9 3/4 and at 10 3/4. Feel free to back up and go write those dimensions down. And then I'm going to fan fold it again. What I'm doing this time is creating a little tent that's going to fit inside the last one that I did. So when I have it done, I want it to look like this. Okay? Feel free to score those down well. I'm just using my thumbnail. A bone folder's good for this job too. And next, I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to fit it inside the last one that I made. I will attach my tape from the front flap of this one to the inside flap of the designed one right here. And I will attach my tape from the back flap to the outside flap of this one here. So I'm creating kind of a tent inside a tent. So I'm going to go ahead and put my tape on and do that. This is a really unusual card. You won't see this anywhere else because I made it up in my head. It's a little bit like one that I did in a Hunkydory kit one time that we actually have a video on, but mine's made differently than that one, but it was inspired by a Hunkydory one. You won't find this anywhere else though. I do think it ends up having a really neat and interesting effect, even if I do say so myself. I do. Okay. Bryce is rolling its eyes at me again, guys. Can you believe it? Well, you have fun. You gotta have fun at your job. Okay, so I'm attaching this flap. I may regret taking the adhesive off the other side of that before I'm done here. And I'm going to line this up nicely. They're the same width, so they should line up nicely. Is it lined up? I told you I was going to regret doing that. This is regret. I shouldn't have taken the adhesive off one side till I had the other side down. That one lined up nicely, but this first one was being a little bit of a bear. I'm going to pull that back off and do it again. One nice thing about working with acetate is it's really forgiving. You can move it. It's not like paper that's going to peel your layers. You might peel your tape, but you're not going to peel your layers. There we go. And that's fitting nicer. Okay, so I've got my tent built. I'm going to score it down yet again. I really want that to behave nicely. Okay, now I've got my base made. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this piece of cardstock. And I want this to be, this is coming off of here. I'm going to use this corner for this purpose. And I want that to be about, going to start with 5 inches. We might cut that down just a little bit, but I'm going to start with 5 inches. I know that this is 4 inches wide, so I know that this doesn't have to be more than 4 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and cut myself a slice off that's 4 inches to begin with. And I think actually 4.5 is going to work just right, but let's see. Now the entire thing is 5. I'm going to start with 4 3/4, and I can cut it down some more. I didn't write down my measurements when I made this. I just made it. So yeah, 4 3/4 is too high. So let's go with 4.5. Okay, there we go. You gonna slide in there? You're gonna make me trim me more? Nope, 4 inches. Worked just fine. Now, it's at 4 inches, and my swan is down in the water. I would like my swan to sit just a little bit higher, I think. So I'm going to take another 1/4 inch off, so I can actually raise my swan, because I can put tape on the back of her card piece and set her up a little bit on that backer. I like that better. I like her up out of the water just a little bit more. So I'm going to put a little piece of tape back here to anchor my swan in place.
Tape flag be good for this?
I don't need it for this one because we're going to come in here, and all I recommend is just slide it against this face piece and then get it to where you want it to be inside, and then press it into the adhesive on the back. So there we go. It'll slide right along the front and still not be catching your tape on the back, so I don't really think you need a tape flag there. Good thought, though. Okay, now I want to build this part that covers the back. It covers my work on the back and comes up over the top. And that piece is going to be, it's 4 3/4 plus an extra 3/4. That's going to be a 5.5 inch piece. So I'm going to cut a piece of my cardstock here that's 4 inches again. And I'm going to make this piece 5.5. That's what I just said, right? That's 4 3/4 and 3/4. Yes, that makes it 5.5. I want this to be 5.5 inches long. I'm going to take my scoring blade which is hiding behind that card. I'm going to put my scorer on. You can do this on your scoreboard. You can do this on any scoring device you have. This happens to be what I had handy. And I'm going to score a line here at 3/4 inch. What that's going to allow me to do is fold this over on itself and create a little cap for this. And this piece will attach to my back. I'll have a nice finished writing area in the back. Now, one of the things you could have done with this, it probably would have been the smarter way to go, would have been to go ahead and score this at 3/4 inch, tape it down, fold this entire back flap and clip it off, even with your acetate. This will work just fine, what I did, but my point remains the same. I made a step there I didn't actually have to make. Okay, so I'm going to put some tape on here, right under this flap. And I'm going to put some tape back here, so it will attach to the back of my card. I'm going to just attach the flap up front. I'm not going to take my tape or my paper off my tape on the bottom one yet. I'm going to set this little cap in place. Just rub it across. Now I've got that one. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to peel my tape in the back. And I'm going to push that in place. Now I've got my nicely covered back. My swan is sitting back away from the waves. I only have a couple things left to do. I want to put my little butterfly on. By putting my butterfly on this front piece, I'm setting it slightly ahead of the butterfly in my folder. So we get a little added dimension, and just for even more dimension, I'm going to put a foam square or two on the back of this little button. As soon as I figure out what I did with them. You guys ever have that problem when you're working, that you have so many supplies that you bury what you're looking for? It seems like no matter how big the spaces I'm working in, I always manage to cover up what I want. Okay, so I'm going to add even an extra little bit of dimension, so we've got that nice butterfly there. I'm going to put this "Life is beautiful, and so are you" out here on this front wave. And it's going to stick up above my wave, a little bit above my wave, so I'm only going to put my adhesive on the lower half of this embellishment. So I'll start there. I'm going to put a couple pieces of tape there because it's kind of hanging out on its own up here, and I want it to be nice and well attached. Life is beautiful, and so are you. Right there. I have a bow all tied and ready to go. I'm going to hit this. This time I just tied a single. I'm going to hit this with a little bit of best glue ever. My tails might be a little bit long. I'm going to clip those again. Remember to clip your tails. You fold it in half. I've got the fold to the bottom. Fold your ribbon in half and clip at an angle upward. You get that pretty little whale tail. Do it again. Fold it face to face in half with the fold at the bottom. Clip it at an angle upward. And I've got that pretty little whale tail again. That's more proportional to my card. I like that one better. Okay, I'm going to put some best glue ever on this. I'm going to hit it here at the tie. Come on. Oh, hello. That's more than I wanted. It'll be enough to do the whole job and then some. I'm going to put a little bit, just a little, spread that out a bit, and put a little bit here. I'm not going to worry about putting any on my tails, because my tails are fairly short, and they're kind of already going in a nice direction. So I'm going to set this aside and let this dry completely before I put it on. This will not need to be lined because it has the writing surface on the back, and we tested it. This will fold down into an A6 envelope. You will probably either want to give this card out by hand or send it maybe in a card box if you're mailing it, because it is fairly deep. But isn't that fun and interesting and different? Again, here's the finished one. Oh, one other thing we could do here that I just think is pretty. See these little jewels we have along the edge here? Go along and put just a few little jewel dazzles in that line, and that would look pretty too. But that completes this card. Stay tuned for some more information. Okay, this has been the Wishes on Wings set from a topper set from the Amethyst Dreams collection at Hunkydory Crafts. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the little thumbs up to say you liked it, because if you like it, please like it. And if you're not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, please hit the little subscribe button. That way you'll be notified when new videos are available. If you are not already a newsletter subscriber, I'm going to put a link to our newsletter down below. In the comments section, you can click on that link and we'll send you a newsletter to let you know anytime a new video is available, and I'll send you a complete supplies list along with links to where you can purchase those supplies in our store. I'm Debbie from Simply Special Crafts. We appreciate having you with us, and we'll see you next time.